My name is Josh Frost. I'm a missionary kid, and I was born in Bangor, Maine, and then when I was 1, my parents moved to Guam, and I grew up in what you call a Christian bubble. I was saved when I was 6. I believe that I was saved when I was 6. Baptized when I was 7 to Philippine Sea. But after that, my life was basically spiritually dead. Growing up in that Christian bubble, you know, where it's church all the time. Growing up in a private Christian school system, so there's church all the time. Kind of felt like a lot that I was spoon-fed a lot of the stuff and never had experiences to actually like witness or experience like the power of God. It's mostly just been told what to do and that's it. Been told like there's traditions, there's rules in place and stuff like that you had to follow, and I just never experienced life the way that other people did. So I went through middle school and high school and all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't until I got to high school when my life kind of took a bad turn. I was in a relationship for about 3.5 years with a girl that I knew since 1st grade, and she moved to North Carolina. And I was out in Nebraska at the time, and she cheated on me, and she broke up with me. And that just sent me down this really nasty spiral. And again, just because how I grew up, I didn't have any strong foundations to fall back on. So what I did is that instead of me turning to God and asking Him help during the situation, I actually got angry at Him and blamed Him for everything. So when I moved out for college, I got into the whole party scene, got into the drug scene, started sleeping with women, basically as far away from God possibly could have been. And it was probably the darkest time of my life, when, you know, it was a good 8-year span, almost 10 years of my life was taken away, basically. And I had to go to rehab. I got addicted to cocaine, and that really hurt. Tore apart my family. Thank goodness my parents still love me. They're great parents, and I'm very blessed to have them. But basically what happened was just bad decisions. It wasn't like I was hanging out with bad people. It was just good people that made bad decisions that had no God in their life. I stopped going to church. I mean, there was a time where I didn't go to church for like 3 or 4 years. Which, knowing that I grew up in a Christian home, that's kind of like, what happened to you, Josh? So I went to rehab when I was 22. And that's actually when I actually got to feel God again for the first time. And through my life, making mistakes, falling away from Him, He always seemed to be there, and He always seemed to show up in the right times. Before I decided to go to rehab, I was actually planning on killing myself because I lost everything that I really cared about. And at that time, I just started going to the worship band. I started playing for them at my church, and it was all taken away, kicked out. Instead of people loving me or supporting me or trying to find out what the problem was, what happened was instead of were accusing me and just tearing me down, and that just made me feel really, really depressed and sad. And so I remember in that meeting when they were just hammering me with stuff, I just shut down. So because of all that, you know, I just planned on ending it. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore, you know. I thought that this whole God thing was fake. You know, all this stuff was going through my mind. Until later that night, a friend called me and said, "Hey, let's talk." And so I went to go meet with him at Starbucks. And that's when I heard God's voice. I was sitting there and I went up to go put sugar in my coffee. And I just, he just gave me the opportunity to go to this rehab called Faith Farm Ministries. And I was like, didn't know for sure, you know. I've always been the kind of person that's always been like a lone wolf, like I can fix my own problems. But this one I couldn't fix on my own. And so when I was sitting up there, I just heard this voice that just said, "Go." And I knew it was different because when it was said, I got this like tingly feeling come over my body. Of course, now being at Hope Chapel, I understand what that means and stuff like that. But I just took that, and I just took like, okay, maybe I should go do this. And I'm going to tell you this. The reason why I said yes to it was because I felt it was a good way for me to run away, to run away from my problems. Whether or not God told me to go, I took it as in like, okay, this is the time for me that I can get away from everyone. So really, I was running away. That was my main intention of it. Then when I got there, and I remember my parents dropped me off, and they were leaving down the dirt road, and I looked back, and I just was like, never felt so alone in my life. Until it was like 3 or 4 days later. They were having this little like worship night that you can come into the chapel, and they would just play music. You can sit there, pray and sing and stuff like that. And a song called "Lead Me to the Cross" came on. And at that time, that was actually one of my best songs that I played on guitar when it came to my church, and I always loved playing it. And when that happened, like I just broke down and cried. And just like I started crying out of like out of hurt and pain, and then I started crying out of peace that was coming over me. And that's when I asked God, like, please give me a second chance at this. You know, I love music and I want to do it for you. And so I just cried out to him and asked him just, you know, somehow there must be a way. So really quick through all of that, he actually gave me an opportunity where I actually formed my own worship band there. Was able to get a bunch of musicians together, was able to kind of run a worship department per se. And it was a real blessing to the guys out there. So when I graduated, and again, I graduated in a class of 4, and when I started, there was 27 guys in my class. So 23 guys did not make it through. But I actually had that sense when I got done my graduation, just that sense of like completeness, like I actually completed something, which was actually a big boost of confidence for me. Because usually a lot of stuff after high school that I started, I never finished. So that was a good thing for me to go through. And it took me another 9.5 months to get back into the worship team. And the program that I went into, that rehab, was already 9.5 months. So basically it was almost 2 years it took me to get back onto the worship team. So I got put back on there. I was really excited. I got to write an album with my church. Things started going through, and then I fell again. I moved up to Maine in 2011 to go back to school. And again, I had a new sense of God in my life, but it still wasn't that strong foundation that that I could always go back to. And started going back into the party scene. I didn't do drugs, but I started drinking a lot, started going out to the bars. Basically got kicked out of college again, and this was my 4th college I've been to. So then after that, I moved down to North Carolina in 2012, and got involved with a Hope Community Church here and stuff like that, and was enjoying that. It was a new sense of musicianship for me. They're very professional, and that's what I liked about it. I learned a lot from the musicians because they were all very talented. But then again, I fell again. And this time, music was taken away from me again. I got involved with a girl that I should never have gotten involved with. And took 3 years of my life away, basically. Got kicked out of that church, got kicked out of the worship team. And at that time, I was like, I'm done with music. This whole calling that I felt on my life when I picked up the guitar when I was 17, this whole calling, I thought it was bogus, because if there was a calling and it was supposed to really happen, then I felt like it would have been easy. It would have been an easy path to go do all this stuff. So after that happened, I put my guitar away. I packed it up, put it in my closet, and did not touch it for 7 months. Didn't even go to church for 7 months either. I kind of fell back into my old routine of what happened to me when I was 22, and I just was like, I'm just done with it. And then through that girl, through my girlfriend at the time, she got me to go to another church called Oasis. And that's when God really started to work in my life again. He put me around some really good people, started putting me around guys that poured into me, not just throwing Bible stuff at me, but actually poured into me with like, you know, with confidence, and they tried to encourage me a lot, whatever, and they really became my brothers. And so I did all that, and then a few years later, we started playing for these conferences, and you know, my relationship at the time was a mess, you know, and it was kind of affecting me on how I was like looking at church and stuff. And we went to this men's conference in March of 2016. It was a men's conference from Foursquare, and we were invited down. We played, and I got really sick off Chick-fil-A, and it was a kind of a rough weekend. But there was a guy that came down that was a special singer for us. His name is Trevor Burris, and I guess through all of that, I guess God started turning the wheels then. Kind of put me on his mind and stuff like that. So that means, so down the road in the summertime, I was actually invited to play at this youth camp. Well, before the youth camp happened, it was in April. I remember it was in April, and I was playing video games, and I paused the video game just randomly, and I started just to cry. And it was because I felt like there was more to my life that I could be doing, and I felt like I wasn't doing it. I was working in these retail jobs, these dead-end jobs that, you know, is just all about, you know, the secular world, and it's, you know, you say hi to the customers, what do you do, but you don't make an impact. And that was what I was looking for, was making an impact. So I said a prayer to God, and I was like, you know, God, can you just do something? I just feel this calling that I'm supposed to be doing something in music for you, but I didn't, but it's not happening. Like, there's no doors opening up. And I said, Lord, can you please just open up a door for me? Because that's the only thing I wanted to do. And I promised him that from then that everything that I would do in music would be for him. Every single time I step on a stage and pick up a guitar is going to be for him. It will never be about me. And then a month and a half later, come to June, and that youth camp, I was invited down, and I went down. And the crazy thing is that I was the only one from my church that like went down. So I was alone with these new people at this church called Hope Chapel that I have no idea what this church was. So we we went down, and the Friday night service happened, and and at this time I just want to tell you that like my relationship was actually really going down the drain, and it was starting to affect me when I was there, through conversations I was having with her and stuff like that. So I was kind of getting distracted until Friday night. I think his name is Pastor Tim. I can never remember what his name was, but he had a sermon, and he talked about community, and he talked about how God can call you to serve Him. And it doesn't mean you have to sell all your stuff and go, be a missionary somewhere in some Africa country, like you can serve Him at your work. You can serve Him, at your, at school. You can serve Him through the community. You can serve Him anywhere. You just have to listen to Him. So I was like, I was sitting there, I was like, yeah, okay, I like that. So he called up the worship team, and I noticed that the worship team, when we were playing, I noticed that we didn't have a sound guy running sound, and during that last song, he was calling up kids that felt like they were called into ministry and stuff like that to serve God. And so they were up, and they were getting hammered by the speakers, man. They were getting hammered by the sound. So I decided to just take down my guitar, because it's not about me. And I turned off my guitar, and I set it down, and I went up and started to run sound. And that's when God spoke to me. And this was a lot more prominent. Like it was a lot more powerful than it was when he told me to go to rehab. I remember I was sitting there, and he said, "Josh," and I was like, "What? What?" And he's like, he says, "I want you to serve me in music, but I want you to take this journey alone." And as soon as I heard that, and I just felt this warmth, really sensation in my chest, and I just started to bawl and cry up there by myself behind the soundboard. Yeah. Which, when I think about it, I get it, God. You put it on my heart to fix something that I saw a problem during the set, but really what you were doing is that you were trying to get me alone, so you can have a conversation with me. So as soon as that happened, I really wanted to talk. I really wanted to talk to somebody, and the first person I wanted to talk to was Trevor. But he told me, "Don't do that. Do not talk to Trevor yet." And I said, okay. I was like, well, then who can I talk to? And he highlighted his name is Josh Hudson. He's a pastor at a Restoration Church down in Alabama, in Huntsville. And so the next morning, I decided to go talk to him. And I told him about my story. I told him about my life. I told him about what happened the night before. And so he decided to pray. And he said, "Lord, Josh hears you calling for him. He answers it, but can you just crack open a door so that he can just see what you want him to do?" And so after he prayed, I walked back in to what at this time it was this huge tent that we're playing in. But I walked back in, and I saw Trevor, and Trevor walks up and says to me, "Hey, I have something I need to tell you about last night that happened to me." He says, but let's talk after sound check. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we go do sound check. We get off stage. I go grab a bag of Lay's sour cream and onion chips. And I'm sitting there eating, and I see Trevor. So I walk up to Trevor, like, "Trevor, let's talk." And he's like, okay. So he talked, and he's like, "God spoke to me last night, and it was personally about you, and he wanted to tell you that what happened last night was real, and that he wants to honor everything that's on your heart." And when Trevor said that, he said, "And with that, I want to offer you a job at Hope Chapel to be my assistant here and help out. So basically, he was calling me into ministry. He was basically saying, you have a job in ministry, and it's not just working at a church, it's in music. And that was the exact same prayer that I prayed a month and a half earlier, and it was answered just like that. So when he told me that, I was just like, I dropped my potato chips, and I was just like, coming in? And he was like, yeah, I want you to come work with me. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like what's going on and stuff. And so I take that back with me, and I talked to my parents. So my girlfriend at the time, she was not on board with it. She didn't really support me a lot when it came to that. But then I remember what God also said. He told me, I want you to do this alone. And I knew what that meant. And that meant he wanted me to break up with her so that I will be alone to do this journey, so that it would just be me and him. But at that time, I was scared. I acted on fear, and I was basically a coward, and I couldn't do it. So I started working at Hope Chapel, and she was really just making things, there's problems going on and stuff like that. And, it was very stressful. And so basically I talked to God. I remember, I think it was in like October of last year, and I said, God, I was like, I know what you want me to do, but I just cannot do it. And it wasn't like, I couldn't do it because I didn't want to get out of there. I couldn't do it because of fear of other things that could have happened with her. And so after I prayed that, I think it was like a couple weeks later, her and I went to Applebee's, and she broke up with me. And literally, I saw the Holy Spirit move in that Applebee's right there, because it was so out of the blue that she was doing it, and the calmness and the peace on her face that when she was saying it, I knew it really wasn't her. I knew it had to be the Holy Spirit of some sort, or something like that. So basically, God fixed a problem for me, even though he told me to do it.
Wow.
And so after that happened, I just felt this like weight and all this stuff just fall off my chest. And that's when God really started to work in my life. Through that time, I was having really bad back problems. And this is going to be a little bit of a testimony of how awesome God is. I had really, really bad back problems, and I started to go to Hope Chapel. When I started working here, people started praying over me, and they kept saying that they felt like it wasn't a physical thing, they felt like it was a spiritual thing. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And they were saying like, you're being attacked spiritually, and it's affecting you physically. And I'm like, because I'd never heard of that before. Even growing up in church, when it came to the gifts of the Spirit and stuff like that, like word of knowledge, which is basically what that was, prophecy, speaking in tongues, healings, all of this stuff, I was taught that it was wrong. I was taught that it was only the special anointed people that could do this. And if you ever heard someone speak in tongues, then it's definitely totally selfish, right? So this whole entire new concept of what I was hearing about here was just like a new form of Christianity to me. And so I just started to kind of dive into it, because it was very unique, and it was very interesting, and it was kind of like tugging at me. And so we went to in November the leadership conference down in Atlanta, and at this time, plenty of people prayed for me, and nothing happened. And then we got this little list about like the different classes that were going on, and like in the movies, when you look at a piece of paper and like a sentence will pop out, then everything else behind it was blurry. That's basically what it did. Like the crazy thing, like when I looked at this piece of paper, it like highlighted this one class, and this class was called Healing, and I think it was like Healing and Restoration or something like that, and it was being taught by Pastor Brian, which is the pastor of Hope Chapel. Okay, that's the one to tell him to do that. And I was just like, oh, hey, that's my pastor right now, you know, like, okay, cool. I mean, it popped out and it's like, oh, I must have to go to this. So I went to the healing class, and it was filled. It was a bunch of people in there. And I sat down next to Trevor and Heather, and I looked to my right, and there's this old guy named Jack wearing a red flannel, and he's sitting there, and I'm like, okay, it's a cool little table. And then Brian started talking about healings and started talking about how like that stuff does happen today. And then he started to like teach us, and I was like, okay, this is exciting. So then he's like, okay, I want you to pair up with someone, because I know I can sense that there's ailments right now, that there's injuries out here right now. So he's like, I want you to pair with each other, and we are actually going to practice this, what he just taught us. So we practiced it, and I was teamed up with Jack, the old guy next to me, and he had a rotator cuff problem. He couldn't like lift his arm up very far, and so I decided to pray for him, exactly how Brian taught us and stuff like that, and his shoulder was healed. And the coolest thing is that I actually felt it. I like felt that warm sensation come through my left hand, out of my hand and my arm, and went right into his shoulder. And he even said that too, that he felt this warm sensation. And after that he prayed, it was like boom. And I did not show it, but inside I was freaking out. I was like, no way this is real. Absolutely no way this is real. So then it was my turn. Well, it was his turn to pray for me. And I said to him, I told him about my back. Mm-hmm. And I told him about like how, you know, how hard and like how hard it's been and how painful it is, you know, how hard it is sometimes to wake up in the morning and stuff like that. So he started praying for me, and the dude said, I really feel like this is spiritual, man. This isn't physical on you, okay? I'm just like, oh my goodness, everyone is telling me this. But he actually went a different direction without just praying. He actually told me, he's like, okay, I want you to clear your mind, and I want you to start like praying in your spirit, and but I want you to tell me what's happening, what you're seeing. And so I was praying in the spirit, and then boom, I got transported, you know. It was like I got transported into this big room, and I noticed what it was. I was standing in front of the stage of Hope Community Church in the Raleigh campus. I was standing in front of the stage because I recognized everything. I was like, okay. And then I look to my left, and I see this figure, and he was in this like really white robe, you know, this big long white robe, and he was kind of like glowing just a little bit, but his face was blurred out, so I couldn't see his face, but I just knew inside me that was Jesus. And he had his arms out like this, and he was motioning me to come to him. So I started walking towards him, and I was telling Jack all of this and stuff like that. And I spoke to him, and Jack was like, okay, what's he saying, you know? And Jesus told me that he's very proud of me for answering his call, that he called me back in June, and that he is with me, and that there are great things for me coming up that I'm going to do for him and for the kingdom. And he also said that he wants me to be healed. And when Jesus started saying that, I could feel my lower back started to really heat up, and like it's this really hot sensation, and I can feel like sweat started pouring down and stuff like that. And then when Jack prayed, all of the pain I ever felt went away. I was healed basically. I didn't feel any pain, and I started to freak out. Jack, of course, you know, hugs me, and everyone's so happy and stuff like that. But I walk out, and I go and I grab Trevor, And I'm like shaking. I'm just like, dude, what the heck just happened? I told him that. And when he felt my back, my shirt was all dry until you got to my lower back, and then it was soaking wet. And I was like, okay, you know, and then I had to go do sound check and do some practice before that night service. And I was just like telling Trevor, like, I don't think I can play guitar right now. So anyway, so that happened. And that was probably the first time I actually really experienced God like that. And, you know, it was, you know, anyone else hearing it, you know, I really hope that when people like hear this story that God speaks to them while this happening, because when you look outside the box, it looks like I just went crazy or something like that. But it was the God encounter that I was looking for, and he wasn't even done with me yet. Fast forward to January, the pain started to come back, and I was really frustrated, and I was just like, I know I was healed, like, what's going on? So I remember it was a Tuesday. I walked into the worship center, and I was kind of limping a little bit, and when Trevor saw me, see, Trevor doesn't get very upset, but when he does, he gets upset. And I remember when he saw me, he like slammed his fist down on the table, and he's like, we are going into this prayer room, and we are going to pray this until it's done with, and never come back. And I think it just was that authority that he was taking, I think that really set us up for some good stuff, you know. So we went into the prayer room, and I was telling him what the pain was like, and I said, like, I'm just like, Trevor, like, this pain isn't the pain I'm used to. This pain is like, it's going like from like my hip and shooting all the way down into my heel of my left leg. And it was killing me. And so during that, of course, after all this happened, you know, he talked to me and told me what was happening with him. And when I said about my pain, God told him to check for an imbalance. So I sat down, and he's like, Josh, can you stretch out your legs really quick, man? I just got to check something. And when I stretched out my legs, my left leg was actually about barely, almost like a quarter of an inch shorter than my right one, which, you know, growing up, like, you know, if you think about if one leg shorter than the other like that, like, yeah, that's going to really throw you off, you know, you're not going to grow correctly, right. You know. And so he started to pray for my leg, and I'm telling you, man, the craziest thing, I started to feel on the top of my knee, my left knee, this, like, it's probably about 2 inches long, maybe like an inch wide, but it was like this little area, and I started feeling this like numb, tingly sensation, and it hurt, but it didn't hurt. It's weird to describe, but it was very, very chaotic. And then it started to move from the top of my knee, and it went past my kneecap, went down through my shin, and went down into my ankle. Wow. And during that time, like, when it was done, like, Trevor said to me, he's like, dude, like, I felt your foot pressing against my hand. It was, you know, and I was like, man, I got to tell you what I felt. And so I told him what I was feeling, and then, like, he stood up, and I was still sitting down, and he says, okay. He's like, get up. And I just shot right up without any hesitation. And there was no pain anymore. The pain was gone. And then I just collapsed and started crying, because I was just like, it was crazy. So I was kind of blown away, like, okay, so did my leg just really grow? Or am I just going crazy, you know? But the fact that Trevor was there to witness it gives it confirmation, because he felt my foot pushing against his hand. So we started going out through the day. I didn't feel any pain, and then around 9 o'clock that night, it was practice, and it was like it was hurting a little bit, and then I went home, and my leg never hurt as much as it did, ever. It was just this aching pain shooting down my leg, but it wasn't like the same pain. It was like this different kind of pain that was hurting. And then God, when I was laying there, I was crying to God saying, you healed me. I felt it. Like, why am I still feeling it? And God spoke to me and said this: what you are feeling is growing pains. And when he said that, I again felt that same feeling, that numb, tingly sensation, but it was more centered and it was more in control. And it felt like someone was taking their hands and it was like massaging my bone. And it started from the top of my knee and worked all the way down into my ankle. And I passed out and fell asleep. And when I woke up in the morning, there was absolutely no pain. I got up, and usually when I get up in the morning, like, I'm kind of slow because I know there's going to be something going and like something's going to tweak. Nothing like that. Stood up, I jumped, I sat down, I squatted, no pain at all. And I'm just like, okay. And then God again started to download stuff about how all this happened. And I remember in 5th grade, I was trying out for the middle school soccer team, and I went up against an 8th grader, and I pulled a move on him, and he stuck his foot out and hit my ankle and actually fractured the growth plate in my left ankle. So if you think about it, if my growth plate in my left leg was fractured, and again never got repaired, because back then my parents thought, you're going to the hospital if you're bleeding and dying, but if that, suck it up, take some Tylenol. So I never really got my ankle checked out. And if you think about then growing up, yeah, my left leg didn't grow the way my right leg did. And it made, science-wise, it made sense to me, you know, like it made medical-wise, it made sense. So then that got fixed, and after Trevor prayed for me, I remember a couple weeks later, like, man, I have like really good balance now. You know, I really felt like a difference when it came to walking, my posture, you know, and stuff like that. And I just, thinking back on it, I'm really like happy and just full of joy that even through all of the crap that I went through, even through my decisions of actually rebelling and the decisions that I made that were my own doing and my fault, that even though I blame God for it, he was still there and he still did this for me. And that to me shows how much love that he really has for us, and how much grace he really has, you know. Because I didn't deserve any of that. I didn't deserve my leg to be grown. I didn't deserve my back to be healed, but he did it anyway because he wants that for me. He wants that for everyone. He wants us all to be whole. So since we're in what that year now, so that was January
2017.
That happened, and then God still had things for me. He still wanted to show himself to me. And we're gonna fast forward to August of this year, August 2017. And this is when it's kind of like, this was like the turning point, you know. It was like God was working in my life. He was breaking down a lot of walls. He was, you know, being more Christian cliche, he was tearing down those chains, you know. He was really working in my life, but it was in such a wonderful, safe place. And, you know, Trevor was there, and Trevor has actually been a witness to a lot of the miracles that's happened to me. And I'm more thankful for that, because there's a witness now. It's not just, you know, it happened to me at home by myself. No, there's a witness to it. So there's some substance to what I'm saying. So come August, we go to what's called it was a conference down in South Carolina. It was hosted by Robbie Dawkins. by the way, that guy is amazing.
Yep.
And what he's doing and the ministry that he's doing, dude, like, yes, I am going to pray for you, man, and you keep doing what you're doing, because you are walking in no fear and you are doing what God is telling you to do. So anyway, so we go through this conference, and it's really eye-opening with some of the stuff that he was saying, you know, and we get back that Sunday. It was early in the morning. So we went down on, I think it was Thursday. So we're down there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We don't get back to like Sunday at like 3 a.m. And we had to set up a bunch of stuff in there. So we were really, really exhausted and tired. And I remember walking into the building at 8:45 because we were late. Some people slept in. That's okay. And I remember walking into church, and it was like there was something in the air that I couldn't really like describe, but it was something different. It was kind of like this really like exciting energy, I guess, like how I could describe it. And I could tell that the whole entire band is just exhausted. Well, we started the worship set, we started the service, and I could tell that the Holy Spirit was starting to move within the church, and it was starting to hit everyone in the band like individually throughout the set. And I remember playing Extravagant, the song Extravagant, and I could honestly, like, I could just feel this weird feeling in my playing hand, and I was just like, this is okay, like, what is going on this morning? I was just wondering, like, what's going on this morning? And then Pastor Brian calls up the staff to the front to go pray for the people, like to pray over the congregation. So of course Trevor and I put our guitars down, and we go stand up there. And what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy, but
good.
But
that's why the camera's on.
Exactly right. What I'm about to say is going to sound crazy, but I am telling you, even the coincidence of this happening and what Pastor Brian said, and then it happens, like, okay. But I actually felt a gust of wind inside a closed room. And I remember when we got up there, okay, when we got up there to pray for the people, Trevor actually stood behind me. I remember it was Trevor behind me, Rebecca was on my left, Patty was on my right, Teresa was to Trevor's left, you know, and I felt like a but it was right on the back of my neck. And the first time it happened, I was just like, why did Trevor just blow on my neck for? I'm just like, what the, like, I did this, and I was like, why, what? And I turned, and like, he has his eyes closed, and he was just, you know, and I'm just like, what the heck is he doing? And it's cool because you have this on camera too, okay? You have this on video. Pastor Brian turns to us and says, you're going to feel a gust of wind. This is not the AC. And when he said that, I felt it the second time. And it went right in the same place onto my neck. And I'm seriously, like I'm touching my neck right now, and I tell you, I can still feel it. And so this, like, it blew, you know? And I was just like, what the, like, and when I was praying, I just like started like, what was that? Like, was that like what I read in Acts about, you know, Holy Spirit comes down and it sounds like a rushing, like a roaring wind or something like that, you know? And when I'm thinking that, Pastor Brian's like, okay, I want you to walk out and I want you to start praying over the people. And this is also on camera too, also on video. I'm started walking and my eyes are closed and I'm praying, and I noticed that I can't walk straight. I didn't know what's going on. I'm just like, what the heck or whatever. And I remember I got to the soundboard over on the side of the room, and I just collapsed on to my knees, and I started to just speak in tongues and stuff like that, just rapidly pouring this stuff out. And I was probably down, I don't know, for like a good 10 minutes maybe, and then I got up, and I just wanted to go sit down on a chair because I kind of felt a little bit exhausted, and I was sitting there on the chair, and then my friend Worth comes over, who was running sound, and he was like, dude, what is going on? Like, you know, like he started feeling this warm sensation in his chest, and I remember he just started just laughing, like he was just filled with helium, and then the dude just started like crying, and just crying and crying and crying, and like I'm just sitting there, and like so I just put my arms around him, I just start praying for him, because I knew what was happening. Like there was someone behind him that was praying for peace, and but I was praying for more, because I knew that he was having a God moment. And just something was happening that Sunday. And so Pastor Brian calls the worship team back up, and at this time there was no preaching. It was just a bunch of prayer, like praying over the children, praying over the adults. Like it was just an amazing service that was going on, so spirit-led. And so we got back on stage, and we decided to do Extravagant again, and do a song that we wrote called I Will Abide. And when I was playing Extravagant for the second time, I can honestly tell you, and I can say this with 100% confidence, I actually felt the Holy Spirit play through me for the first time. I was doing things on the guitar that I did not know I could do. You know, even putting together the notes and like the melodies and stuff like that. Like I was so surprised, and you know, I just like, it was just, you can just see the Spirit just hitting absolutely everyone. So we get to I Will Abide, which is the last song, and we get to the end of it, and I told the band through the talkback mic, I said, okay, listen, Trevor's going to end the song. It's just going to be him. You all do whatever you want. Literally, I said that. I said like, do whatever you guys want. I'm like, go off stage and go pray for someone. Come out, just stand there if you want. Pray, do whatever you guys want. So people were like, you know, going off stage and praying for other people that they felt, you know. I called out Ben, who was the drummer. I called him out and I prayed for him, because I know that he was struggling with some stuff, and I was trying to help him out. And so after that was done, I kind of walked over to my little section, and I just kind of like sat down, because I was so exhausted. And Kayla came over and said, Josh, just keel over, dude. You're done. Your job is done. And I kind of felt like God was speaking through her right there, you know, like my job is done. I'm like, okay. So I just lay back. And when I laid back, I literally felt like I was laying on clouds. I felt like I was hovering, like I wasn't even laying on the stage anymore. And I know what happened to me. I was basically what you read in the Bible, and it was called being drunk in the Holy Spirit. And I just had a conversation with God about the season that's about to happen. You know, he told me, you know, that he's going to accelerate his plan, and the time is now. And that's a cool thing too, is that he told other people that too in that church that day. And so I'm laying there, and I don't know how much time's going by, but a friend of mine named Jared comes up and starts praying over me, but he started praying in tongues, and I can tell you through my human ears, I do not know what he was saying, but within my spirit, I knew what he was saying. And he was calling out and praying stuff out inside me that I honestly did not know that he knew about me. And it was some really, really personal stuff that I'm not going to share on camera, but
Yeah.
it was some really personal stuff. And he is just praying in these tongues, and I just like felt just all this peace over my body. And then my other friend Landon comes up, and he sings me this song, this spontaneous song that he just sings, and whatever he sang, like, touched my soul and like locked everything. So I'm laying there, and when I opened up my eyes, I looked up in the ceiling, and the whole entire ceiling was this like deep, like purple mist. It was really beautiful, and I remember feeling these 2 tears come down my eyes. And they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of joy, because I remember I said, like, I see you, Father. And then him and I just had this personal conversation. And we get done with that, and I get up, and I kind of sit up, and I could not stop laughing. I just started to laugh and laugh and laugh. And the very next day, I walked into staff meeting. We had staff meeting on a Monday instead of a Tuesday. And I walked in, and Patty says, "Josh, you look different." And I'm just like, I feel different. I gotta tell you guys what happened to me yesterday. But other people saw that I changed, and I felt like I changed. There were some things I was struggling with before that day, before that Sunday, that after that Sunday I did not struggle with anymore. Like, for instance, you know, I had a porn problem, you know, like a lot of men go through and stuff like that. But ever since that day, I've not looked at it. I've not cared to look at it. And it was just like, that was just the one thing that changed in me that day. Because I can honestly say, like, even through those dark times, like God, like, physically touched me. Like, he felt like at that time it was supposed to be like that, I guess, or like he wanted to do that. And it has literally changed my life. You know, I have no doubt anymore that God's real. Everything that we've read in the Bible is true and has happened. Everything about these gifts of the Spirit, you know, the healings, prophecies, all this stuff, like, it's real, you know, like that wasn't just for that time or anything like that. Like, it's still happening today. And yeah, it has just changed my life, you know. I mean, from a kid that grew up spiritually dead, I would say, you know, and like looking back now and just seeing like all of my mistakes that I've made, everything, like, God still was pursuing me, even though I had my back turned to him most of the time, but he was still pursuing me until finally I just surrendered myself and I just submitted myself. And then he said, okay, well then let me show you some awesome stuff. Let me show you some cool miracles. And that's when I saw healings, you know, like, through this time. I mean, I feel like 3 people. I've healed my own mother. She had a shoulder problem, and I remember I prayed for her at an event called Sacred Rain, and her shoulder is healed, and she can actually lift her left arm now all the time. You know, I've had prophecies. I have people prophesize like over me, and stuff comes true. Like God is real, and you know, he is pursuing everyone, and he loves everyone, and he wants the only thing that he wants in return is the same love. And like basically, if you want to sum up my whole entire testimony in one word, it's hope. That there is always hope, and that hope is cemented in Jesus Christ. Because before I did not have that. My identity or how I thought of myself was always put into earthly things. It was always cemented in, like, you know, drugs or alcohol, because that was the cool thing you saw on TV, or, you know, it was always cemented in, like, me being an athlete in sports. It was even cemented in music. But God has showed me that my identity is actually in Jesus Christ, and because He died on the cross for me, that He died for my past, present, and future sins, which means that even though I mess up now, because of the sacrifice Jesus made, that I am still viewed as a perfect person to God, and that ball and chain that, you know, you drag around, or that those regrets or anything like that, those don't matter anymore, because that's not what you are. You know, you are a child of God. You are loved. You are like there's hope. So that's really like my testimony in a nutshell. You know, I mean, I could have gone on for another 6 hours on stuff. You know, I want to get into like nitty details, but if anyone's out there and, you know, they ever catch themselves in those moments where they feel like there's just no way out of something, or it is just pure darkness, like, there is hope. There is a way out. There is an answer, and the answer is Jesus Christ. There's no other answer. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through Him. So, if you are struggling, you know, seek Him, see what happens. You know, take that little step of faith, because once you take that one little step and show God that, you know what, maybe I do need you, He will come meet you there. So, but yeah, that's basically everything. That's basically everything I kind of want to talk about.